Have you ever felt trapped, like the walls are closing in and there's no way out? For most of us, it's just a feeling. But what happens when that feeling becomes a violent, physical reality? Arthur gripped his steering wheel, his knuckles white. The final demand had come that morning. Now, the hulking figure of Rocco filled his rearview mirror, blocking his driveway, blocking his escape. This wasn't just about the money anymore. Arthur could see the cold fury in the man's eyes. This was about making an example, and Arthur was terrified he wouldn't survive to learn the lesson. Stay with us to hear the incredible story of how a moment of public humiliation became a man's greatest source of strength. The world outside Arthur's 2008 Honda Civic seemed to shrink. All that existed was the quiet suburban street he had called home for 20 years, and the mountain of a man walking toward his driver's side door. Rocco didn't knock. His first action was a thunderous bang of a meaty fist against the window. The glass shuddered, and Arthur jumped. "Get out of the car, Arthur." Rocco's voice was a low growl, vibrating through the car's frame. Arthur's hands trembled as he fumbled for the lock button. A futile gesture. He'd missed the last 2 payments. He had run out of excuses and time. The loan, which had once seemed like a lifeline after his wife's hospital bills piled up, was now an anchor, dragging him under. Rocco's patience snapped. With a roar, he slammed his elbow into the window. This time, the glass didn't just shatter, it exploded inward, showering Arthur in a spray of tiny, glittering cubes. Before he could even react, the door was wrenched open. A tattooed hand shot in, grabbed a fistful of his shirt, and yanked him out into the daylight. Arthur, a man who had spent his life among the quiet rustle of book pages, stumbled onto the asphalt. His glasses flew from his face, cracking on the ground. The world became a blur of color and menace. He felt a knee in his back, forcing him face down onto the pavement. The rough surface scraped his cheek. Humiliation washed over him, hot and sharp. He could feel the eyes of his neighbors from behind their curtains. Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, all of them witnessing his complete and utter failure. "This is what happens when you don't pay," Rocco bellowed, his voice echoing down the tranquil street. He reached into Arthur's pocket, pulled out the car keys, and stood up, dusting off his hands. He gave Arthur one last contemptuous kick to the ribs before getting into the Honda, starting it with a loud rev and speeding away. Arthur was left there, lying on broken glass in the middle of his own driveway, every part of him aching with a pain that went far deeper than his bruised ribs. This was it. Rock bottom. Just as the silence settled, a screen door creaked open. "Arthur." "Oh my God, Arthur, are you all right?" It was Brenda from next door, a retired nurse with a will of iron. She rushed to his side, her face a mask of concern and fury. "Don't you move," she commanded, her professional instincts kicking in. As she knelt beside him, she held up her smartphone. "I saw the whole thing. I got him, Arthur. I recorded everything." She tried to help him sit up, her voice firm. "We're calling the police. That wasn't a repossession. That was a criminal assault." But Arthur couldn't bear it. The thought of police cars and reports of his private shame becoming public record was too much. He pushed her hand away weakly. "No," he mumbled. "No police, Brenda. Please, just delete it. It's my fault." He staggered to his feet, refusing her help, and stumbled into his house, locking the door behind him. Brenda didn't delete the video, but she respected his wishes and didn't call the police. She knew pushing a man so deep in shame would only drive him further away. The next evening, she knocked on his door with a container of homemade chicken soup. Arthur opened it a crack, his face pale and bruised. He tried to send her away, but Brenda was persistent. "You haven't eaten, Arthur. Let an old lady feel useful." Reluctantly, he let her in. The house was dark, the curtains drawn. She didn't mention the assault. Instead, she asked about his garden, about his books, and slowly the story came out. He told her about losing his job as a city librarian after 30 years. He spoke of his late wife, Helen, and the mountain of medical debt. The car, he explained, was the last big thing they'd bought together. The loan was a desperate measure to keep the house. His shame wasn't about being poor. It was about feeling he had failed the memory of his wife. Brenda listened patiently. The next day, she returned. She'd shown the video to her nephew, a paralegal. He was horrified. He, in turn, showed it to his boss, Evelyn Reed, a lawyer who ran a small nonprofit dedicated to fighting predatory lenders. Brenda handed Arthur a piece of paper with Evelyn's name and number. "Just talk to her, Arthur, that's all." The first time Evelyn called, Arthur hung up, but Brenda's words stuck with him. He was a victim, not a failure. With trembling hands, he dialed the number. Evelyn's voice was calm and professional. She explained that the interest rate on his loan was illegally high, and Rocco's actions were felonies. For the first time in months, Arthur felt a tiny spark of hope. He agreed to meet her. Filing the police report was the first step. The civil suit came next, but the system doesn't give up its prey easily. The loan shark, an untouchable figure named Silvio, began to push back. It started with silent phone calls at all hours. Then a rock shattered his living room window. The words "drop it" were spray-painted across his garage door. Arthur was terrified. He was a man of books, not of bricks and threats. The police were slow to respond, dismissing it all as teenage troublemakers and a civil dispute. The pressure was mounting. One afternoon, he missed a promising job interview at a private school library because he had no car. That was the final straw. He called Evelyn, his voice a whisper, and told her he was done. He was dropping the case. Evelyn and Brenda refused to let him surrender. "They win if you quit, Arthur," Evelyn said firmly. "This is what they do. They isolate you and they scare you." The next day, Evelyn made a bold move. Without telling Arthur, she gave the video to a well-known local news blogger. Within hours, it exploded. The clear, brutal footage of a massive man dragging a gentle, middle-aged librarian from his car and beating him in broad daylight sparked outrage. The story was picked up by major news outlets. The police department, now facing a storm of public criticism, was suddenly very interested. A warrant was issued for Rocco's arrest. But for the case to be ironclad, the prosecution needed Arthur. He had to face his attacker in person, pick him out of a lineup, and testify in court. This was his final test. Walking into the courtroom felt like walking to his own execution. His heart pounded. He saw Rocco at the defendant's table, looking just as menacing in a cheap suit. But then Arthur looked at the gallery and saw Brenda, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. He took the stand. When the prosecutor asked him to recount what happened, he spoke in a clear, steady voice. When Rocco's lawyer tried to paint him as a deadbeat, Arthur looked directly at the jury. "I owed money," he said, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. "I was prepared to lose my car. I was not prepared to be assaulted, beaten, and left on the street like garbage." The video was played. A hush fell over the courtroom. The footage was undeniable. Rocco was found guilty on all counts, and his testimony helped launch a full-scale investigation into Silvio's entire criminal enterprise. Months later, life had changed. The court ordered his car returned, and the civil suit resulted in a settlement that paid off his debts and gave him a fresh start. But more importantly, Arthur had changed. He didn't go back to being a librarian. Instead, he used some of the settlement money to start a small financial literacy program, operating out of community centers. He taught people how to read the fine print, how to avoid predatory loans, and where to turn for help. One evening, a young man stayed after a workshop, his eyes filled with the same fear Arthur recognized so well. "I'm in trouble," the man whispered. "I don't know what to do." Arthur sat down next to him, no longer a victim, but an advocate. "It's okay," he said softly. "Let's talk."